Hi, welcome to the program, and I'm your host, Greg Fenton. Each week, we explore topics and ideas related to the experience of people with conflict and look to promote the profession of conflict resolvers. We are available to connect with at fentonmediation@gmail.com and at 647-227-4734. Check out the Facebook page for Mediation Station and also the group page to ask to become a member. Also visit the YouTube channel, Fenton Mediation, to see videos of past shows. Listen to podcasts of Mediation Station on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Please follow us at our Twitter account, which is at Fenton Mediation. The conversation today is called Playing in the Red Zone, Relationships and Conflict. With me today will be Becca Hayes, and she'll be with me very shortly. We will engage in conversation with everyone attending, able to listen and watch the conversation. Microphones and webcams will be closed, and if anyone wants to contribute anything, there are two options. One option is to see the chat icon located at as a bubble at the bottom center of your screen, for you to click to then type in a comment or question, and then click to send. Or you can click on the reactions icon that is also on the bottom center of your screen. Then click on the hand icon within that for us to see you want to speak, and we will open your mic for you to speak, to share your comment or question, and then we'll close your microphone once again. The show is being recorded for both video and audio purposes that will be uploaded for public access on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts afterward. So as I mentioned, today with me for a visit and a great conversation on playing in the red zone, relationships and conflict, is Becca Hayes. Hi, Becca.
Hey, Greg.
Thank you for visiting with me on the program.
Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
How are your things in your part of the country?
Oh, over here in BC, we're pretty wet. We've, some of you may be looking at the news and seeing how the devastation of our roads and our farmlands, especially in Abbotsford, and then different parts, different connecting highways, and a lot of destruction. So
that's in close in proximity to you, right?
Yeah, it's thankfully I live on the side of a mountain, and Abbotsford, where a lot of the biggest floods are about 15 minutes away from me.
That's pretty close, I would say, for sure. Okay, well, I hope situation, gets to a better place sooner. I can see the devastation on the news and all the effect with the highways to even get to the places, right?
Yeah, it's pretty devastating. It sends people into a panic, right? To fill up with gas, so places are running out of gas, grocery stores are running out of food, but that's coming. We're not going to run out of food. We're not going to run out of gas. Like, there's a lot of that stuff that's happening. It's not doomsday is what it is. So, but yeah, it puts people into a panic for sure.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably talk about this piece of it, the reaction relative to the response, and people's tendency to quickly go to the reaction mode and how that impacts them and their relationships.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's the thing. We're in relationship with everything. So we're in relationship to the weather and see how we reacted to it. Right. So yeah, I look forward to, that's a great one, Greg. We can pull that one right in there.
We will really soon. Let's present how you are and who you are. How about you share some information about some of the passions in your life?
Well, I am the best of the three children that my parents had.
Should we emphasize the best?
Yes, I am the best. I am the youngest. I am the favorite, although I believe my brother might be on, and he is not the favorite, although he is the only male of our family. So I am the best of all three of us, I believe. Both my parents have told me that. And I So it's he's going to disagree, but I know what my mom and my daddy have said. So I come from Alabama, in the deep South of the United States. I was born in Georgia, raised in Kentucky and Alabama, and was there for 30 years. And got involved in coaching women's basketball. I played at university, and that's where my passions were always team sports. And so was always playing whatever season it was, the neighborhood we were playing. And it was a good fit. So then I went into coaching. I did a short stint in radio and television, and that only lasted a little bit. So
I'll just say that I look good for the radio.
You have an amazing voice.
Yeah. Oh, you're charming me, please.
That was one of the first things that I when we first met, that I was like, I love Greg's voice. He's got that radio voice. So it's no, I love it. So
here, imagine me now. That's better here. No?
Oh man. Well, you remember when you had to tell me how to say your last name because I kept saying it in my accent, and you were saying it, and I was like, yeah, I'm saying it, and you're like, no, you're saying it. It's like,
yeah. So how did you end up here, up north of the border?
Well, I went. I was coaching women's basketball down. I had a job down in Florida, and I ended up somebody I knew. They're the university out this way in the valley was hiring, and so I wanted the international experience, and I do that because it is international. It is a whole, like, you need a passport just to get out of the South above the Mason-Dixie line half the time. So it was international, and I came up here for a 3-year contract and ended up just loving British Columbia. Loved the people, loved the culture, the variety of the culture. And I just could not, I just found my way into different work outside of sports. So it was just a good fit. It just kind of was where I landed. So that was 22 and a half years ago.
I'm not good at math. I can't put together the 30 and 22. I'm not sure.
Well,
so I'm not sure what that totals.
I'm 52.
Oh, well, thanks for helping me out.
Hey, you're welcome.
So how do you see any of your passions connecting with your professional world, which I know you talked about your basketball and the sports stuff, but how do you see that connecting to your professional piece?
Like I talked about how, all of the sports comes with lessons, right? And those are, like, hopefully athletes can take those lessons that they learn and apply them to their world outside of sports. And I always found that, when I changed careers, so I changed careers and I went into working with high risk, marginalized youth and families. A lot of conflicts, a lot of mental health, trauma, abuse, addiction, involved with the criminal justice system. So these lessons that I had learned when I was playing sports, like, it just seemed like it just naturally fit for me. People who are in very hard, difficult times, very stressful times, a lot of high emotions, a lot of and then they've got additional layers that they're looking through. They're trying to, doing their best and doing well for where they are and what tools they've got. So the things that I learned in sports really kind of just transferred over into my work.
And why would you go intentionally into people's, what I could say, struggles, challenges, especially with trauma? I mean, that sounds like to me it was purposeful on your part. There was an intention, yet it sounds like putting yourself in that kind of lived experience of other people's experiences.
Well, it's like, okay, so in playing basketball, it was one of the favorite times was when you've got about a minute left in the game and you're down by, 2 points. And so you've been practicing all week and you're playing against, one of the top ranked teams. And this true story, we played against the 15th ranked team in the nation when I was a brand new head coach down in Florida. And it's actually the team that I had just come from as an assistant coach. And so you're down a minute to go into game. You're down, like, a lot of emotions are running through you, right? Some people are calm, some people are frantic. It's all of these things, and it's that's when it slows down for me, right? So that real intensity, I don't know, maybe I'm just a junkie for adrenaline and those things, but that stuff slows down for me. And so it's just like when I'm invited into people's lives, right? Like, so it's a real honor, real privilege to walk with people who are in that, what I like to call the red zone, right? And so, and now that's a football term. And I played basketball. I did play, a little bit of pickup football here and there. But it's that high alert time, right? And so people have invited me in, they trust me to walk with them through this time. And that's when it's just how you respond to the red zone is what will make the difference, right? So, yeah.
Makes a difference for the people that you're entering into that zone with. I think it would be considered a factor of how you enter into that zone to how they then relate to you or connect with you, and then how that red zone experience goes.
Well, yeah. So I don't know, like, maybe we've got people who know what the red zone is, right? The red zone is, well, it started out the way I'm not the inventor of the red zone by any means, but the way I came to live with that kind of like applying to a lot of my things is a colleague of mine at the community-based organization where I've worked we were in charge of developing this anger management course. Now, how many people get upset, ticked off about, oh, I've got to take anger management, right? Like, and nobody want to talk about that, right? So it's like, or they just think it's junk, right? Oh, I've got an anger problem, right? So they identify as an angry person, which is not good. They are a person. They've got some strong emotions, right? They just don't have the tools to get through those strong emotions, right? So I was like, okay, we're going to call it the red zone, right? So then it intrigued people. It reduced their I don't know, that fear of entering into something saying, oh, I've got anger, what's the red zone? So the red zone is a football term. It's the last 10 yards before you get to the end zone, right? So there's a whole lot of things that are happening in that zone, that red zone, right? So how you enter into that, if you've practiced, if you know what you're doing, like, the plays, you're running these things, right? You're entering into relationships, like, there's a whole lot. And I want to unpack that if we can, right? What that means of how you would enter into a red zone. But that's where, depending on how you enter into it can determine if you're going to get to the end zone or not, right? So I said, okay, so it's anger management, but really, because you talk about, like, I don't know if you've ever seen like the anger mountain, like, there's an event or a trigger that something happens to a person. Then you have a thought about that event. And then you have an emotion about the thought of that event. And then if we're talking in the context of anger, if you get really upset about it, you're going to blow your top like a volcano, right? So I was like, yeah, that's absolutely true for a lot of emotions, right? So it's like, if I'm super sad, something happens and I'm thinking, I think about that event, my emotion is I'm really sad. So what can happen if we're sad? A lot of things, either healthy or unhealthy ways, right? And so you can only stay in that explosion type, if we're talking about anger, for so long, right? Then the body actually physically will come down unless you get re-triggered on something else. And then it's a cycle, right? So then I was like, okay, well, that applies to all of our emotions, right? So that's where the red zone came from.
Okay.
Anyway, so
Yeah, for sure. So today we're going to focus on relationships. And why did you want to have this conversation in this way?
Because it was a bit of a theme for me here recently. A lot of things, a lot of groups that I've been part of, and it's it's about how you how you're in relationship with not only with yourself, with others, with the environment, with knowledge, with anything and everything, right? And you can only move, at the rate of your relationship, right? And so things happen like I teach some parenting courses as well. So like if I've got let's say a mom and a daughter, right? Daughter's doing things that mom is just not pleased about, right? So if mom is going to, how she comes in and approaches her daughter to say, you've got to change, that daughter is either going to say, no, I don't, blah, 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 blah. Or, well, what do you mean, mom? Or, okay, right? So it's how you enter into a conversation, into that conflict, right? Which will have a direct result on that relationship, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's how we present, the information if we're trying to communicate something. And, we have to have intention and purpose so that it's not just about us as the speaker. We have to be aware of the listener, the one on the receiving end of that.
Well, exactly, right? So it's about, because we talk about intentions and actions, right? Our intentions are private, meaning I know what my intentions are. You don't know what my intentions are, but you can see what my actions are, right? And so if somebody comes in and says, like, it's like when you have a little kid, right? The little kid runs out in the road and you're like, all of a sudden you scream at your kid, right? Like, what are you doing? Why did you do that? Like, are you kidding me? Like, what were you thinking? What's that kid going to think? That kid's going to say, mom's mad at me, right? And so, but your intention is different than what your actions are. Your intention was like, you're afraid, right? You just want your child to be safe, right?
Yeah.
So if it's like, say somebody comes up behind me and scares me, right? Jumps out and goes, ah, I turn around and like throat punch them. Like, right? So
you automatically, you're defensive, right? And you're going to react, right? And then you find out, oh, it's somebody close to me.
yeah, and we're just having fun, right? The thing was just to scare me, right? But instead, I turn around and I look angry and I throat punch them, right? No, I do not condone. There's a disclaimer: no one is to do violence on, right? Please do not take any violent acts that I have said on this.
No, yeah, absolutely. Disclaimer.
Listen at your own risk.
Peace-loving people here.
Right. But the intention of the person who scared me was just to have fun, right? But I didn't know that, right? But depending on, say, what lens I'm looking through, what my personal experiences are, what my trauma would be, right? Now trauma really comes in and plays a big factor. Our life experiences plays a big factor in on how we see the world, right? How we react to the world, right? So that is when we talk about our intentions are private and our actions are public. That's where, if we can set up going into our red zone, right? If we set up and tell our intentions, how we approach that, then can help, reduce further harm to the relationship. Right? it sets us up. We set up the right plays, right? Like if you're, you've got 1 yard to go before you make a first down, or 1 yard to go to get into the end.
The end zone. Yeah.
Yeah, the end zone. Yeah, thanks. I was losing my thought there. I've watched too much football today, and I was like, I mean, depending on who you have on your team, how much you've practiced, you're going to run the right play, right? Whether that's a quarterback draw, right? Or if you're going to, fake it to, or give it to the running back, the offensive line blocks, there's a lane there, goes in there, right? Or if you're going to, do a pass, right? Run a post, do one of these things, right? So you just have to know. But the thing is that you've got to set the conversation up. And that's why I was like, when you and I were visiting, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about this, it's about, if you can prepare people to listen to your intention, right? And you come into it with a real, like, you've got to know yourself. You've got to know, like, kind of the rules, right? The boundaries of what you're going to play in, right? And you got to know about your own identity factors, right? And so then you can come in and you can ask, you can do an invitation into a conversation, right? Now that person can choose to enter into that conversation, or they cannot, right? If they want to be in relationship with you, then they're going to be curious, right? Because conflict is good, Greg. Let me repeat that. Like, I wish there was a blinking light up here. Conflict is good. And so,
though traditionally, when people hear that word and you put it out there,
yeah,
they tend to have this negative reaction. It's like war, fight, all these negative connotations and understandings. So gravitate to unpack it a little bit. Why is conflict good too?
Because conflict means that you're still in the game, right? So think about it. You got offense, defense. They're in conflict, right? One is trying to score. One is trying to prevent the other from scoring. We're in conflict, right? My brother says something to me and I get angry about it, and I may react instead of respond to him. I may react through an intense emotional mind and say a few choice words to him, or say something that would cause harm to the relationship, right?
Okay, yeah.
But it means that I care enough about what he has said to me, right, that it bothers me. So that means I'm still in relationship. Now, if my brother says something to me and I don't care, I don't want to be in a relationship with him, I'll just ignore him, right? And I've been on that receiving end. I love my brother because he's my only brother, and I love him even if I had another brother. Sometimes, like, he would ignore me and I'd be like, oh, I'm hurt by that, right? But it's still because I'm in relationship with him. So conflict is good. It's how you enter into the conflict. It's how you enter into the game is what matters, right? And so you got to have rules about conflict, right? And that's where, if you're having relationships and you set those up, then you can determine whoever you're in relationship with, whatever you value, say what you value as a family, what you value as in, say, intimate relationships, friend relationships, or say employer-employee relationships, right? There are boundaries within all of those. And if you can know those, right? Like, let's be respectful. Let's be caring, right? Let's have empathy for one another. Let's not cause harm to that person, or to our workplace, or to our friendships, right? So those are kind of our boundaries that we play within, right? We're not going to hurt anybody. I'm not going to throat punch anybody, right? Disclaimer on that. So some of those things, or I'm not going to name call, right? I mean, I've done my great share of name calling as a very spicy kid, although I am the spice of my mom's life, as she always says, which clearly
Yeah.
notes that I'm the favorite.
We established that for sure. Yeah.
Yes, I know.
And we're not trying to create any conflict, in the event your brother ever has access to this conversation. For
Well,
sure not.
I do believe John F. Child is my brother. So it means John, the favorite child. So right here, it is a real sense of that competition that my brother and I have right now, right? So it's
So a
Anyway.
healthy one, we'll say.
Oh, absolutely. I love my brother. He's an amazing man. He is, he is great. He's an amazing man. He does great work with what he does, and he's taking care of our mama really well. So, but it's going back to our having rules and playing fair within our game, right? Like we don't want to name call. We don't want to bring up past harms once we've resolved those, because that would just continue to put barriers up in our relationships.
Well, it would sense to me that if we were bringing up past stuff, that for us bringing that up, it hasn't been quite resolved fully. And so it's a residual of something left, not dealt with for the best interests of the relationship. And so if that happens, how do you see the other person on the receiving end trying to process that?
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, that's like a whole lot of can of worms right there, Greg, is that, I mean, was it truly resolved, right? Like we talk about in victim offender mediation, right? So like you've got it, you kind of go from like those positions to interest, right? And so people are very like, this is my stance, this is your stance. And the way to work through that is through an invitation. Like let's say we need a referee, right? So a referee knows the rules of the game, right? So sometimes, and we do need a referee to come alongside us in either in our relationships, as like our parenting to our child, or in our personal relationships, or even like in our work relationships. Sometimes we need that third party person, right? We need a ref. So you're trying to find out, like, you don't want to go like, and it goes back to me talking about where if I go in demanding that other person listen and change their behavior to meet my needs, look, you ain't going to get far.
Well, like, what's your experience when you tell people that it's only about yourself? Like, I, and stays within I. It's not, relationships for me are like shift from I to us and we, and working together.
Well, and that's exactly it, right? Like if you're playing on a team, unless you're like a long distance runner, or if you're like a tennis player, even though you can play doubles in tennis, but you know what I mean? Like if you're playing an individual sport, that's the I, but you're still in relationship to everything else too. So if your relationship it's important because you're together, right? Unless you choose, like, this is not a healthy relationship. And sometimes that's what needs to happen. Sometimes it's not healthy and you can't resolve things at this moment in time, right? But if you can invite somebody in to say, hey, you know what? Instead of talking about what I need, what you need, and I'm at fault or you're at fault, let's just talk about and say, hey, there's a disagreement or a difference of opinion or perspective on this situation. I'll take my stepson for an example. Holy cow, man. He would take his dishes and leave them in his bedroom like forever. And we were constantly always going, where are the dishes? Where are the plates? Where are, have no idea. Like and so.
You saw the cupboard was like, okay, we got to eat today. Open the cupboard and there's no plates there.
It was just always, it was a fight, right? So it was, we had to go in and his interest was to eat in his room. Ours was, we needed the dishes in the kitchen, or at least in the dishwasher. I mean, it took us years to get him from his room to the kitchen. And then finally into the dishwasher. I mean, we come in and there'll be all these dirty dishes on the counter, and we're just like, the dishwasher's right there. And so instead of saying, I need you to do this, and he's saying, no way, I don't want to do that, whatever, I'll do it later. Then that's where you can invite the conversation to say, hey, I would like to have a conversation with you about my needs, your needs, have an understanding, and talk about dishes, right? When would be a good time?
When I'm hungry?
Exactly. It used to be like, I used to threaten all the time. You're going to get one fork, one knife, one plate, one cup. And that's it. And the rest of the family, we're all going to get just that. There's going to be 4 plates. That's it. And then, he would look at me and just go like, oh, BB, whatever. So, but I had to learn that. Now, he was a type of player, because we're staying on the sports thing, couldn't yell at him, right? Couldn't like, had to give him time to process, right? There, and like some players, you can yell at them like, pull your socks up, like, come on, suck it up, let's go, work harder, right? And some are like, hey man, how's it going today? Hey, like, what's going on? Like, are you feeling well? Like, you could really got to go around a mountain just to get to the we'd really like you to put in more effort, right?
To get to the heart of the messaging. Yeah,
exactly. So you invite, you agree that there's a problem, right? It's not me, it's not you. Here's the problem. And then that's where you can come back around and say, I'm really curious. So if you cannot get furious, you can get curious, not furious. You are going to get somebody who is going to be more open, because as soon as you start throwing blame out on someone or start name calling or judgment, then you're going to get resistant. You're going to get defensiveness, right? And so you invite that, hey, there's an issue here. Let's talk about it. What's happening for you, right? Be curious. Ask question. What's going on? Like, what are your intentions behind that? What would help? What are some of the challenges that you're having for bringing your dishes into the kitchen? Like, I mean,
so you're opening up a pathway for communication that is amongst you and this person that you are trying to connect with, to hear their perspective. Let me interject here a comment from the crowd.
Oh,
tonight.
Okay.
Some great points have been raised, Becca, i.e., our best intentions in communication do not always have the impact we hope for. And conflict doesn't need to be framed as a negative aspect of communication, but is a bridge to more meaningful relationship with others. How do you process that?
I absolutely love that. It absolutely is, right? Because and it kind of goes back around, like, conflict is good, right? But it does, if you can set the conversation up, if you care enough to be in relationship with a person. We're not going to go through life and never be in conflict with anyone. Although I take that back. I had my grandma Lucy. I don't think I was ever mad at her, and she seemed like she was never mad at me, right? But I mean, for the most part, there's always going to be conflict in some way or the other, right? And so if you can get some understanding and how you set that up, right, and you want to be in a relationship, that conflict will build and strengthen that bridge to better understanding, deeper understanding, not only about the other person, but about yourself. Because I don't think we know about ourselves enough. I don't think we take time enough to know who we are and what our needs are, and how we're coming to a conversation. What are my identity factors? What is my life experience? What lens are we looking through to how I see you, right? And that plays a big part into how we interact with people. But if we can take those opportunities, yeah, it's conflict, but conflict is good. Someone said, good work will always encounter resistance, right? So Yeah.
some struggle there, right?
Yeah.
Because that's for me that area, that space of struggle, quote, is an opportunity. I mean, that's a comment. Conflict is an opportunity, also from someone in the crowd, and that's where we can experience our greatest opportunities with growth and development to help transform ourselves, to enrich ourselves, rather than seeing our differences as barriers or obstacles that we tend to go around or avoid. The idea is really to go into those spaces and places, to live with them, through them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like being on a team, right? Like we're not all, and as a basketball player, there's 5 people on a court at a time, right? So you've got a point guard, shooting guard, small forward, or a third, a little bit taller guard. You've got a small forward, and you got a center, right? Different sizes and shapes and abilities, skills for each of those players, right? We're not all the same, but our goal is, right, is to be in relationship with one another, and to outscore the other team and prevent the other team from outscoring us. But we all have different skills, and so I really like how you said that, Greg, is that it is like how we show up, right? If we can honor who we are, who the other person is, like if you and I, we're pretty new in our, our friendship, our relationship here, right?
Yep.
So, but understanding and seeing the things and the differences, and learning more about your experiences in life is just so rich. And if we're working together, your strengths can add to, and make up for anything that I don't have experience in, right? And vice versa. So it is knowing yourself, and seeing conflict, rephrasing that, shifting your perspective that conflict is good, because it's like working out. It's like lifting weights. I don't know how many people have ever lifted weights, but you know what I mean? Like you got to lift weights to get pumped, right? So, I mean, some people, that's their goal. Some people, it's just to, tone up and cardio and all of the other stuff, right? But if you're working hard, right, you can transform relationships. But you're putting there's strain that comes with every relationship. But how you enter it, how you think about it, is how you're going to act about it.
I think too, with relationships, it's, we have different kinds of relationships. We have superficial ones, passing ones that, you go to the grocery store and you buy something, cashier, you're in and out. That, I would say, is not much depth to that relationship. It's a passing one. We have all the way to intimate relationships, which tend to be our closest ones. We have neighbor, friends, a whole range, people at the workplace. I think there needs to be some kind of way that we identify for ourselves, what do we want with this relationship, with this relation to this person, to then invest ourselves into that relationship to get, quote, some value. And it's not monetary value that I'm talking about. It's the intrinsic values that we get, the rewards of pleasure, happiness, sometimes pain, but that's not necessarily an intention per se. What's your perspective on something like that?
Well, I think you're hitting it right on hitting the nail right there. It's about like relationships are good, right? They can be good. There are times when relationships are not good. I mean, I go to the grocery store, and hopefully my relationship, how I'm entering into my conversation with that person, is going to be respectful. That is, I'm going to get my needs met. They're going to get their needs met. Do you know what I mean? But so we move into different types of relationships, like you were talking about. And that's where I think knowing who we are and what we need in our life is, and how we want to live, right? So it's like, you've got your grocery store relationship to your closest friends, to your intimate partners, and they have different levels. But if you can know the value that, like, prioritize relationships, know yourself, prioritize yourself, and work hard on those relationships, work hard on yourself. But that's the key thing, is you got to know yourself. You got to know how you're entering into it, right? And if you don't, then you're going to be coming in and making a whole lot of demands, and it's going to be met with resistance.
I would say too that there would be an openness to want to know the interests of the other person in the relationship, and not just be there as oneself. And it's with creating a pathway to connect with another person. Before you respond to that, if you want to, there's a question from the crowd. If there is conflict and one person sees it as an opportunity and the other person is stuck in defensiveness, how do you move forward?
That's a great question. I mean, there's a lot of ways to how I would see that. It's like, I would be curious to what the other person is thinking, why, like what's keeping them, or how do they see the situation, right? Is it and so if it's not a conflict to them, I'd be curious to see, like, why it's not, right? And be open to that. But I'd also be open and curious to seeing why I see it as a conflict, right? What is it about that situation or this conflict that is causing me to think of it as a conflict? What work do I need to do? And sometimes you can ask, you can put up, like, healthy boundaries and say, this isn't working for me, right? Like, and I can't be as intimate into this relationship right now because I need to take care of myself at this point. But then there's times when you can just, or like, you can be in it, or you can say, well, maybe I need to shift my perspective, because not everybody can bring everything that you need, right? And if they're not at a certain point, it's like, you got a Division I player, right? And I don't know how many people are going to know about Division I, Division II, Division III, like levels, skill level of players, right? And so sometimes, like, Division I players, they're going to get drafted to the NFL, right? So, let's take the University of Alabama, Roll Tide, right? I had a plug in there, so.
Do we get sponsorship dollars here?
Oh man, if Nick Saban heard that, if University of Alabama, absolutely, maybe that man makes the most out of any college player or a head coach. Yeah, as a coach. Anyways, and so, but he should. He's the legend. So, but like, they're going to be asked to do more, right? So sometimes people can't do more than what they're capable of doing. And that could be like, if you're saying this is a conflict for me, and they're saying, no, it's not for me. And you're saying, what's my curiosity about this? Why are they not seeing this as a conflict? How much do they care about what's happening for me? Right? Why am I seeing this as a conflict? What's my care for them? Sometimes you just, like, you're saying this is the need, this is your need, and they're just not capable of shifting at this moment in time, right? Like, and that's okay. Like, it's okay that it doesn't end like, like winning the ball game. Sometimes it's just a pause. Sometimes it's like I need a timeout, and that's healthy, because you can't play a full game sometimes all the time. Sometimes you need a timeout. But if you state your intention of why you need a timeout, right? Instead of like, you suck, I'm right, and you need to go sit down, right? Like, that's not going to get you anywhere, right? That's going to cause even more conflict, and that's going to cause harm in the relationship.
Yeah, especially when one person is trying to impose that on the other person in the relationship, and the other person really doesn't want to have that timeout, not ready for a timeout. They want to continue to interact in whatever way it is.
And it's okay when you state a boundary, right? it's like, the whole thing of like when you're on a plane and all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's turbulence, and then the air masks come down, and what do they always say? If anybody ever listens to the this way, and if this comes down, put the mask on yourself first, then you put it on your child, right? Because it's counterintuitive. We're like, I'm going to put this on my child first, right? But actually, if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to care for that child. If you don't take care of yourself, like your mental, your physical, your spiritual, your whole wellness, you're not going to be able to give the best into that relationship. And so sometimes you just have to say, I need to take care of myself. I want to be in relationship with you, but this is as far as I can go at this point because I need to take care of myself. And that's okay.
Right. The tendency, though, is that a lot of us tend to give to others of ourselves without consideration for ourselves as much. And that in some way devalues the productivity, effectiveness of the health of a relationship.
And it does, because people usually think about like, what can I get from a relationship, right? When you enter into a conflict, what am I going to get? I'm going to get my point of view across. My brother and I would argue, right? I'm right. He says he's right. What, right? It's that, right? So if I'm arguing, say, with a friend of mine, and it's the same thing. It's like, what can I get? If you enter into relationships and always needing your needs met, right? Mm-hmm. Then what's that called? That's called a one-sided relationship.
Selfish. I mean, what's the flip side of that, right?
Yeah.
What can I give to the relationship?
Exactly. And sometimes you can just give the hard boundary of saying, this is unhealthy. I want to be in a relationship, but it may not be as deep, right? You might just have to stay in the shallow end and not swim down there into the deep end with this person, right? I don't know if that makes any sense. We got off from football over to swimming.
It's all sports. What's the difference?
Yeah, I know, right? Thanks for whoever asked that question.
So you mentioned earlier, though, about referee. How would one identify a referee in a relationship?
That's a great question. There's what depends on kind of the structure of what I can see a referee needed in all kinds of things. Say if you're parenting, right? Say two parents and a child, or a parent and a child, and say sometimes the child, and we never want to put her, and it's not a place of our children to ever be a referee. But unfortunately, I've seen it way too many times where the children have had to be a referee because parents are not thinking of their children first, right? So let's go back, and because that's a whole nother can of worms again on that, right?
That's next week's show.
That's next week's show, right? So stay tuned. Sponsored by University of Alabama. No. Right, roll tide. So say if I've got a parent and a child who's arguing about a chore, right? And they just go at it. Mom doesn't understand. Kid doesn't understand. Mom doesn't understand. So then the other parent comes in and might need to say, "Ooh, we need a timeout. That's not fair." Like, why are you bringing up why we grounded our kid for breaking the rules on a totally different subject, right? Or yes, they paid the consequence for coming home late and this. So that's unfair. That's not fair play of coming in. So this other adult might have to come in and say, like, talk about the unfairness, but then also might have to come in and say, what mom is trying to say is that she really cares for you and really wants you to be home at a decent hour. And this is the reasons why, right? You can list those reasons, right? Depending on the age of the child, depending on the nature of what the child is doing, that the youth is doing, or, the environment, where they live, all kinds of different factors that could come in to say of like, mom's real desire is to keep you safe, but it's coming across as controlling in the kid's view, right? So then the other parent could then say, well, really, you know, maybe extending the curfew a little bit later in the summertime when it's lighter might be able to do, give a little bit more freedom, autonomy, and trust, and building trust. So that I can think of, or like in a work environment, right? You've got employees who are arguing over, there's numerous things that we could all, could argue about. But sometimes you might need someone else to come in to really, because our emotions are too high, right? We get stuck in the world of our emotion mind, and we don't get into that place of where there's a wise mind, right? We start reacting versus responding to each other, right? And so we might need someone else, our employer, to come in or bring somebody in to say, hey, let's unpack, let's see what your positions are. Let's hear those, right? And then let's try to find that moving to the interest, right? Let's moving to so we can see each other as human beings who bring a ton of value to one another and to the company. You're different, but you're bringing different things in. So let's be curious and hear what's happening for you to feel this way. What's happening for you to feel this way and to think these ways. And then let's try to move forward into, starting the game up again.
Yeah, I'm hearing, the paraphrasing and the reframing to take it out of the perceived negative or hopelessness into something, let's just say, non-judgmental, more neutral, and that presents a pathway for hope. That can be the new reframe to build upon as the template, and for the two or more people to invest in some way with purpose and intention. I mean, communication is fundamental for that.
Well, and absolutely, it's if you, and sometimes walking with people, like in my other job that I do, I've got several jobs right now. So in one of my other jobs, it's one of my role is to really walking with those high risk, marginalized folks that are in really tough times, and they have no hope, right? There's such deep hurt and trauma. They can't even wipe their lenses off because they're just looking through so much, either if it's mental health or addiction or trauma or anything, and they can't even see what could be. You have to hold hope for people sometimes, right? So going back to the conflict, one person sees conflict, one person doesn't. You can have hope that relationship will remain, right? And even if the other person can't see where you're coming from, you can still have hope in that, right? I mean, you got to be a realist to and know what's healthy for yourself, right? But having that hope and carrying that for other people is so important, right? And having it to where that's where we enter in. Greg, you and I are in a conflict. I value you and I value our relationship so much. And even though we're disagreeing about a whole lot of really tough stuff right now, but if I want to be in relationship with you, I'm going to reframe it, change my perspective, and to say, okay, this is just friction. How do I be curious to see what's happening for you? What's alive in you? What are your needs, right? And then I'm going to ask if I can share those things with you. And then we're going to talk about that and what do you think about that? How do you feel about that? This is what I think. This is what I feel. And then you can then move that into how you can make change to prevent it from ever happening again, or to know what to do if conflict does come up again. Because you're going to get in the red zone. I'm going to tell you, sometimes you get in the red zone multiple times in a day, right? So it happens. But if you value the relationship and you have hope to remain in a healthy relationship, whatever that may be, whether it's friendship, like an intimate relationship, a work relationship, if that is your true goal and that's something that you value and you guys agree on valuing that, if if people do, right, then you can get through those things. But it's learning how to communicate that, right, and playing fair within the boundaries of the relationship and the conflict.
It might be that people value the relationship in the other person, yet they have this sense of themselves that maybe I just don't know how to navigate that. I don't know how to navigate through my own emotions, my struggles. And I do want to have this relationship with you and build upon it. Yet, sometimes people's sense of self can be their greatest situation where they're not able to look beyond oneself. Because I think when you have relationships, you have to start with self, and then you have to have intention to look beyond oneself to create the pathways of building, transcending with another person.
Yeah, it's like if you've got a player who thinks that they are the best player on the team, and really they're not, like, but they think that they deserve to be a starter for that team, right? Like, you've got to be able to have that conversation, or you've got to be able to recognize. And that's where a lot of, like, you got to do a lot of work on yourself, right? Like, that's what's healthy, is that if you can go like, oh yeah, I'm not as I don't read the offense as well as my friend Greg there does, right? And so of course Greg's going to be the quarterback in this game. This is a really important game here. I can come in as a backup or plays that are needed, right? But you got to know yourself in order to not think, so you won't think just about you and your needs, but the teams, about the person that you're in relationship with, right? And then if you can also think of Greg, really, he's a great player, right? And this is what really would need. He's a year ahead of me. He's going to, have time to get drafted for this next year. I still have another year to play, right? I'm going to say, hey, Greg, I'm rooting for you. I want you to go in and play, right? I have now shifted from recognizing my skill, my place, your skills, your place, what's coming up for you. I'm thinking about you. I'm thinking about our team as well. So yeah, I like how you say that, Greg.
Let me actually inject a little bit more commentary from the crowd here.
Well,
Couple of things. One person said it does, and emphasizes make sense. Another person said after completely makes sense, thank you. And then this one is a profound one. As I like to say, life is perspective. So using sports ball in all its various forms can make things a win-win. In other words, draw upon a variety of coping skills to get everyone to understanding each other and moving forward out of the red zone into the happy zone. Someone signed off, Brother John.
Yeah. So that's my brother right there. My brother was not the sports person in the family. I'd like to say he's the real intelligent, smart guy, right? And I was the athlete. So he likes to push my buttons all the time. And by calling it sports ball, I'm like, oh, you guys watching the game, you're watching football, or you're watching basketball, or he was like, oh, you mean sports ball? And I react before I even know it, because I am like this younger sister reacting to my older brother who is like, antagonizing me. So yes, it is about making perspective, moving from the red zone to the happy zone. I don't know.
So like yourself, and we talked about reaction relative to response, and not getting caught up or pulled into someone else's agenda. Sometimes people provoke us for different reasons. And I think it's important for us to have that self-awareness, to be informed about ourselves in relation to another, and do the best for ourselves as a starting point.
It is, like, you got to know yourself. And that's where a lot of people think they do, but you really got to know, like, what are your triggers, right? And so if there's a real intense time or a conflict, then are you going to react? And we react because we're emotionally charged, right? If we can take time to understand what's the trigger for us and understand where that's coming from, and then to be curious to finding out, more about them, we're going to move from reacting, calling my brother, jerk, to my mama's probably listening too. Or I can respond and say, yes, Brother John, it is, I understand that you call football sports ball. You call all sports ball, that, but understanding his nature, that he's understanding the game, right? And so I'm responding, so I'm not going to go invoke in more antagonizing comments from him or to pour fuel on that fire, right? So if we react out of our emotion mind, and we don't take time to process what that is by really knowing ourselves in a deep way, right? And so we can get out of that emotion mind and move into a wise mind and respond. We're gonna move from regret. How many times have you ever said anything or done anything that you regret? Like, I mean, I know I have, to making response that are healthy ways to a reconnection, to a deeper connection, not only with ourselves, but with that person, right? Those people in our lives. So it is, do you want to regret and make your point, or do you want to stay connected or reconnect and be curious and respond in a healthy manner that doesn't cause harm and it wants to be understanding instead of just demanding people change for their benefit, right? We come into conversations with our own identity factors, and we're typically making demands on other people based on our agenda, right? And sometimes there needs to be that, like in the sense of things are not healthy. Like if you're killing somebody, well, that's probably a little dramatic, right? I mean, if you're doing something that's pretty illegal or really harmful,
or harmful, yeah,
harmful. Sorry, it's the see my brother. He's getting me all charged up there. So if we can ask things and try to be curious, like why are you trying to do that, right? What is it the need?
Yeah.
But understanding the intentions behind things, right? And so there's a lot of like, but this and that, and so it's trying to be understanding, right? And I don't want to regret things.
Yeah, and I think what's the space between reaction and response? It's for me the pause, the moments of reflection to process what we might tend to react to with our emotions that are not necessarily connected to a rational action, to then process to try to make sense and then respond, which is more connected to what actually did happen, with more intention to what we actually want to make, to see, to contribute, to build upon the relationship. So, whatever I will say is an observation about, the commentary, your brother, etc. It shows an interest. It shows he cares because he actually made this comments. So if he didn't care, he wouldn't do any investment of his time and energy. So that's one thing. And then someone else has followed up with all the strategies that you are talking about can be used universally in all relationships that we have, personal, intimate, work related.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, right? And that's the thing. It's we're connected to everything, right? And yes, my brother, I appreciate, like it speaks volumes that my brother is here, and then my mama, like they're sitting down in Alabama listening to us, right? And so that speaks a lot of love, right? And I see some other people on here that I know too, and that's a lot of love, and I appreciate that. And there's been so many things that I've learned from all of my relationships that I've been in. Some have been good, unhealthy. Some have been and are still very, very amazing, and that's but it takes a lot of work. And if you want to invest in other people and those relationships, you're going to do that, right? If it's healthy for you, if it's healthy for them, you're going to take that time to walk that bridge of conflict, right? And build those bridges, right? And learn to know yourself well enough to, when you need to pause, right? As you say, and to reflect, that you give yourself permission to be healthy enough to think about things and to respond, right? And yeah, that's
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
So we have to close out very soon. Got a
Oh.
couple more questions. Yeah. See, I told you before, I wish there was more time with the conversation, right? All right. So here, what can you suggest for people who may be experiencing being in, quote, overtime with their relationship, with the tension rising and struggling to stay connected?
Overtime's tough, right? That's when the clock is really ticking. So, well, it kind of comes back to like what you were talking about, Greg, it's about taking pause, right? It's okay to take a time out. If you need to say, if if we're in an argument or something, right? And we're skilled people. Let's say that you're very skilled, right? So you're gonna tell me, you're like, hey, you know what? I value this relationship, because that's the most important thing. Anything and everything in the world, it's one of the things that I value the most are relationships, right? What do you want this relationship to look like? No matter what's happening, no matter what the struggles are, it's about relationship. But if you need to pause because you know yourself well enough, but you know you're still emotionally charged or if you're like, whatever those emotions are, they can be, you name all the emotions, right? Give me those primary emotions, so those secondary emotions, like pause, to take a time out, to collect yourself, reflect, and do that. But have a commitment from both parties to say, we're going to come back. We're going to take time. We're going to give ourselves this amount of time. This is how I'm going to work on what I know to work on. And hopefully that other person is going to make the same commitment to say, these are the things, these are the issues that I'm hearing you say. These are the things that are important. I know we value this relationship. I'm going to work on these things, right? You can stay and you can set up your own rules of that timeout. Do we check in? How much do we check in, right? And do we need other people to help us work out some of this stuff, right? Healthy, like if I need a trainer to work on a knee injury, right? Then I'm going to go see my trainer to work on that. If I need to unpack some of my trauma, I'm going to find those pathways to work on that trauma that may be preventing me to showing up to being the healthiest person that I can be for myself and for you in this relationship, right? And to say come back. But then it's also super important to know when you're coming back, but how you're going to come back, right? So, and you may say we'll come back and then we'll go, but you might have to say like halfway through, if there's a certain amount of time, to say, now maybe we should start talking about what we want it to look like when we come back, right? So whatever that may be, right? Like we can list all kinds of different scenarios, but I think it's important for us to establish how we're going to work on a plan, right? Establish a time for it, and how we're going to come back, reintegrate into the relationship. So we stay connected and we can prevent things, or at least we know how to handle situations if they come up in the future.
Yeah, with the hope that it's, strengthens the relationship from where it was at when that pause or that timeout happened. So what have you learned about yourself through all the variety of relationships you've had over time?
Oh, well, I surely have learned how reactive I can be. I was a hot-tempered kid, right? I think that's why my mama calls me her spice, because I was hot.
Picante, picante.
Exactly, right. So it's and people laugh when I was like, yeah, like developed and teaching this, anger management red zone. They were like, what? So like I've learned that I've got to know myself. I've got to value myself enough to take care of myself. I've got to value other people and those relationships. I've got to be curious and be willing to be very open and listen, even when things are so difficult. Like if somebody brings up something about me and it makes me uncomfortable, I need to, if I'm valuing that relationship and that other person, I need to be willing to sit and in that uncomfortable space and to hold space for what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, and park it while I can still listen to them, right? And so then I can be that full person, right? So what I've learned is relationships are constantly coming and going and changing. How I show up to each conversation, each relationship, I want to be consistent, right? I want to know who I am and how I show up, right? And if I've caused harm, right, which I know I have, and I know I will, and I know it's constantly, intentionally, unintentionally. It's always unintentionally, unless I just choose to not use any skills and just go road raging off on somebody, right? So I try my best not to do that. So it's about valuing people enough and yourself. And that's what I've learned about relationships. You're always going to have conflict. It's always going to be some kind of spice somewhere.
Absolutely. Picante, caliente, using Spanish terms.
I know. ¿Cómo está? I know. No, is that French or is that Spanish? I'm learning French.
That's Spanish. How are you?
Yeah, I know. I'm learning some French too, and so, but I won't try my French skills.
What would you like people to understand about our conversation? So somewhat as a takeaway or takeaways.
That conflicts is always going to happen. There's going to be stressful times in life, and how you enter into those conversations, that conflict, to those relationships, that's really super important, right? If you could take away the judgment and the blame, and there's a fine line between I'm observing that and I'm judging that, right? And that could be a whole nother segment as well, right? Oh, but that's, what? So you got to know those things. But if you can know yourself, know others, cause no harm, and be curious, not furious, and just walk with people, right? And just know that I am the favorite child of my mama and my daddy. And
that might be the most profound piece of
that is the most profound piece.
I'm not sure. I'm not going to say any judgment about that. Wonderful discussion, very informative and spicy. Anyone in the audience want to make a comment or question as we're about to say, see you soon, good night, hasta luego, hasta pronto, just keeping in the Spanish language motifs here. Of course, I shifted from a fantastic chat. I took notes.
Oh, Shelley.
Someone took notes. Are you going to write a book, maybe?
If I was like, I tell you, I come from a line. My Aunt Appa and my grandmother on my daddy's side, they were storytellers, and it would be amazing. If I had a ghostwriter, it'd be great. And then I could have everyone in there. That would be awesome.
Comment. Excellent content. Very relatable. Things I will take into every relationship I have. So you've planted seeds, you've scattered them around, and they'll germinate as they will. I want to thank you very much, Becca. You see, go with the flow, just be in the moment, and everything works.
Exactly. It's like Coach Nick Saban says. He's the University of Alabama football coach, and he always says, "Be where your feet are." Right? So what do you mean by that? That means like be where you are right here, right now, and show up. right? Like if we think about the past stuff, like there's times to think about that, to reflect on it, so we can have, better futures, right? Or if we just spend our time daydreaming and being in the future all the time, or wishing our relationship was better, right? It's not going to get there unless you are where your feet are, right? You got to go to work. You got to do the work. You got to do the work on yourself, and you got to do the work in the relationship, even when it gets hard, even when you come up against, like the difficult times. You got to know where your feet and be where your feet are. Anyway,
Yep.
sorry.
No, don't apologize. It's I guess the last comment. Sorry, I missed the first half, but we both know the sports analogies would be utterly lost on me. Love you, Becca. This was awesome. Someone named Heidi.
Oh, Heidi.
Yeah,
Thank you, Heidi. I love you
absolutely.
too.
Actually, the show is being recorded, and so this conversation will be uploaded to YouTube channel, Fenton Mediation, and I don't want to put any pressure on my support team here in the near future, very near future. So people will have access to keep connecting with it. Thanks very much, Becca. And thank you, Laura, and the crowd there as well, supporting delivery of this. Anything in parting for tonight, Becca?
I thank you so much. What a privilege and an honor to spend time with you and with everyone else here. That I see your names, but I'm not seeing your faces. So I just really appreciate it, and I value so much, Greg and Laura. Thanks for all of the tech stuff, and what an honor, what a privilege. Thank you for asking to spend time.
It's my privilege to be in your presence and with this conversation too. So working together. And, amongst us in the crowd are other people that were part of a continuing journey that we're going to build upon too for other people's benefits. So thanks very much, and we'll see you soon sometime.
Yeah. See you soon.
Yes. All right. Good night.